Chapter 5 The House of Delights.
You've never left Citadel? Not even once? Why?
We were walking on a wide, cobblestoned road packed on either side with people and tents. Vendors shouted at us, at everyone, and a dense river of people flowed with us and against us. I was trying to keep the kebab I was holding from bumping into or stabbing anyone, including myself. Despite the noise and press of strangers dressed in all manner and color of clothes, it was the smell that I found almost overwhelming. A mix of perfumes and sweat and food and urine and incense that nearly made me want to vomit several times from the intensity of it, and it kept the spear of meat that I had not wanted safe from being eaten any time soon. "I never wanted to leave," I yelled back to Elda. "I thought that it would be dirty, smelly, and crowded. Imagine my surprise." Her laughter drowned out the cries of a vendor offering quality rings and jewelry at the best price. The best price.
This is the worst of it near the gate. It thins out soon enough.
I could see no end to it, though. Behind us and on either side, Citadel's matte black walls rose impossibly, dizzyingly high, seeming to divide the world into bright daylight and pitch darkness. In front of me was Elda's pack, and that is what I concentrated on not losing sight of. It was difficult, however, to not be curious about some of the stalls, especially the ones offering rare books and mechanisms and promising the lost knowledge of our ancient fathers. Yet I saw many of the vendors had a sweaty, desperate look to them that dissuaded me from lingering, and the few items that did capture my brief focus were, on closer inspection, much less impressive. When Elda caught me dawdling near one of the book vendors, looking at an exceptionally large volume bound in an unusual skin with gilt lettering, she confirmed my suspicions.
You don't want any of this junk. It's just bait for unwary sods coming into birth with dreams of fortune and dosh to lose. The worst are the treasure maps that lead to a predictable stabbing in the chest.
She turned and resumed walking through the crowds, and I followed, although admittedly reluctantly. The tents ended abruptly, and we entered a wide circular area dominated by a tall fountain at its center, with cobblestone streets radiating from it. Water rose up irregularly for 5 meters before splashing down in a knee-deep circular pool. There was a steady flow of people and children filling buckets and carrying them away, or idling and conversing near the hip-high stone border that encircled the pool. 2- and 3-story buildings encased the area, the ground floors consisting of shops or inns or tap rooms, judging by the plaques and signage. I would not mind sitting down to rest for a moment," I said, looking at a tavern sign that read Fountain's Folly.
Not quite yet. We're nearly there,
said Elda, and kept walking past the fountain, proceeding down one of the roads that led away from the fountain and Citadel's walls. The shops and inns we passed began to look more well cared for, and the people more well off. Their clothes were better made. Some had obvious guardians in armor, and many made use of a hired rickshaw for transport. Occasionally a guildsman or woman would pass in their colored robes, and several shops seemed to employ sepios to stand guard. The smell of the area was better as well, and I found myself nibbling on my kebab, now cold but still unusually delicious. I was considering asking Elda if we should hire a rickshaw to carry us wherever she intended. As the building spread out, it became what I had read to be but had never seen, large manor houses and estates with manicured greenery and stone walls topped with curved iron barbs and black wrought iron gates. We passed several of these massive manses before Elda steered us towards the largest, a sprawling estate that appeared to have been cobbled together in an architectural spasm of styles. One side was a rounded stone base, topped with a turret in dark oak and whitewashed plaster with windows at intervals and dormers in the slate roof, and then connected to that an arched covered carriageway, and above more dark oak with white plaster and windows with a brown thatched roof. Then a taller stone section 3 floors high with a steeply angled, tall sloping roof in a different slate, with a dormer window at its peak, and then what appeared to be several connected smaller houses pushed together in a mad jumble, some entirely of wood and others wood and stone, and one of the rooms jutting out from the side and supported by braces underneath, all with different roof angles and shingles. I counted 5 chimneys, all distinctive styles, and several outbuildings in both stone and wood. I was fascinated. Passing through the open gate, Elda said,
"Don't veer off the path, those aren't trees,"
pointing to 2 leafless trees on either side of a grand stone staircase leading up to a set of double doors in the tall stone section. I then noticed the branches slowly moving, yet lacking a breeze to move them. I moved to the center of the gravel path. We ascended the stairs, and Elda grasped the brass knocker, hitting the door several times. After a pause, the right door swung inwards, and a tall, thin, pale man with hooded eyes and slicked black hair greeted us. "Sarah Elda, always a pleasure," he drawled, enunciating the words carefully and deliberately, as though each carried a wealth of meanings. "May I escort you and your companion to the salon for refreshments? Dashel will be along shortly to attend to your trappings, if you would be so kind as to remove them."
"Thanks, Farron. I could murder an ale and leave no trace,"
said Elda, dropping her pack to the floor. I did the same with relief. She then began removing her armors and weapons, dropping them piece by piece. I hesitantly removed my new hatchet and laid it on my pack. A young girl in a plain blue dress entered, eyes to the floor, and began gathering Elda's belongings. Farron closed the door behind us and led us into the space above the carriageway, a single large room with windows on both sides, a plain wooden door at one end and a second door beside the one we had entered from. It was furnished with numerous comfortable-looking chairs with side tables and long couches, and, in one corner, an array of oversized pillows and carpets. A long sideboard cabinet stretched between the door beside us and its partner, which was covered in a rich-looking white satin cloth, and on top of that an assortment of carefully arranged dinnerware, cutlery, and folded cloth napkins. Elda flopped into a leather armchair, and I chose the one next to her, sinking into it gratefully with a sigh. "Would Sir care for libation?" Farron was addressing me, arms folded behind his back. Sure. What do you have?" "We have whatever Sir desires, quickly procured," Farron replied. Elda seemed amused at the response. "Oh, well, I'd like a chilled cider, please." "Very good. And I shall return with Sarah Elda's ale as well, unless there was anything else?" And he retreated behind the second door, bowing slightly. I turned to Elda. "Where are we? What is this place?" She had closed her eyes and tilted her head back into the chair.
"You'll see. I figured you and I could do with some cheering up, you especially," she
said, smiling. The room had a very pleasant scent, cinnamon and bergamot, and while I could hear some sounds from the city outside, it was muted and removed. I looked at the artwork on the opposite wall, a portrait in oil of a beautiful young woman standing near a fountain, wearing a transparent flowing robe, facing away but looking at the viewer over her shoulder. 2 others entered the room, a young man and woman, the man carrying a tray with 2 pitchers and tall glasses, and the woman carrying a tray of small sandwiches. She smiled at us and gathered some of the silverware from the sideboard, while the man approached and said, "Elda, how have you been, my dear?" setting the tray down on the side table between Elda and myself. He wore a loose buttoned cream shirt, untucked from the light linen trousers and open to the chest, and his clothes seemed very well made and well-fitting. He began pouring ale from one of the pitchers and handed the glass to Elda.
"Denny, I was hoping you'd be working today. Stay and join us,"
she said, taking the glass and motioning to a nearby armchair. "That would be my immense pleasure," he said, filling a second glass with cider and passing it to me, looking at me briefly and directly in a way I was unsure how to interpret. He filled a third glass with ale and sat in the offered chair, taking a faint sip from the glass.
"I recommend the chicken and apple salad. It would pair very well with your cider,"
said the woman, offering me a plate and a napkin. Her tray of small sandwiches was now beside me on another side table, each carefully cut into triangles and without crusts, and the whole arranged with a border of colorful flowers and herb sprigs. I took the plate and napkin and several of the sandwiches. Thank you," I said. Feeling awkward, I followed with, will you sit down as well?"
"Perhaps later, thank you."
And she smiled warmly, passing a second plate and napkin to Elda, and then offering the tray to Elda, who shook her head.
"I am rather curious about your associate,"
said Danny, crossing his legs fluidly and leaning back into his chair, looking at Elda and then to me.
"And the nature of your association. I propose a game."
"Oh?"
said Elda with a raised eyebrow and a barely suppressed smile.
"I like games. I also like prizes. What's on the line here?"
Denny leaned over and whispered to her, and Elda burst out laughing.
"Oh, that could be fun. And I get to choose if you lose. Deal?"
"Deal. A game of 3 questions, then, posed to either yourself or your friend here, where I attempt to unravel the mysteries of your bond. The answers must be truthful, but will not require any explanation beyond a simple yes or no." He leaned back again, placing his glass of ale beside him on the table, and laced his fingers in front of him. "I noticed just now that when I said, 'your friend,' there was the slightest involuntary shake of his head, which makes me think your bond is something else. Knowing that you are of Citadel, it makes me wonder if you and he are guildmates. Yet he doesn't have a warrior's build or disposition, nor does he wear guild colors. And still I suspect that his pale skin and shy demeanor are signs of being a guildsman. My first question, then, is posed to him," and he turned to face me. "Are you now, or have you been, a guildsman of Citadel?" "Yes," I said. He smiled. "That much seemed obvious, at least to me. I have met many of your kin, and there is a certain way, difficult to describe, in which you carry yourselves and speak to others. Not simply shyness or a pallid complexion, but a separateness of unshared experience with those not guild-born." He took another small sip of the ale. "I also noted that when I asked if you were a guildsman, it caused you pain, rather than being a source of pride or a simple fact. This, in addition to your clothes being guild-made and not signifying a corpus, leads me to believe that your bonds to Citadel have been severed." "Is that a question?" I could feel my chest clenching. "I feel it has been answered," he said, softening his tone, "and having no desire to cause you discomfort, I will apologize if I have done so, and will pull on that thread no longer. Let us consider that, then, to be my second question asked."
I turned to watch the woman who served us sandwiches take the platter back to the sideboard and remove a large stringed instrument from beneath. She sat on a stool in the corner and began to softly, unobtrusively, play a melody. She was quite skilled. "That leaves the main question of your companionship. I suspect it is not a romantic entanglement." And at that Elda sniggered, but not, as I felt, with any sort of deliberate cruelty. "Nor is it that you are escorting a criminal out of Citadel. It is possible that this young man has valuable skills that are highly sought after, and I think that a buyer has sent an envoy to procure a man of talent. Elda, for my third and final question, are you escorting this young man to his new vocation?"
"Yes,"
Elda said with a grin. "Then I deduce that this unnamed young man is a trained medico, and that his new patrician has hired you as an escort." "Adduce, not deduce," I said quietly, watching the woman play.
"Wrong and wrong,"
said Elda.
"Ren is an archivist. A wordwright, actually. And his patrician didn't hire me."
As the afternoon became evening, several new guests arrived and were seated a polite distance from us, guided by Farron, who seemed to glide through the room rather than walk. 2 of the guests were guildsfolk wearing black robes. Another guest was a middle-aged man who left almost immediately when greeted by another young man, and the last was an older gentleman wearing very expensive-looking clothing. There was also a flow of what I can only assume were employees or servants. Some were like Denny, who seemed to specialize in conversation, others who played music, and still others whose main purpose was attracting the gaze with their choice of clothes or scent or slight touch, when serving what seemed a never-ending assortment of small delicate foods or refilling my glass. I was content to sit alone and observe, drinking cider and then hard ale, moving away from Elda and Denny after excusing myself to empty my bladder. The washroom was through the door at the opposite end of where we entered, and was not plumbed as was the Citadel, but consisted of a seat and dark chute, with powdered lye to be sprinkled down after using. It was clean and spacious, but still an unsettling reminder of my loss. I asked for my backpack to be brought to me, not intending to leave, but to examine those few things I could call my own. I read and reread the contract and examined the object I had called a repeater, finding no seams or obvious method for opening it, if it could be opened and was not simply a solid mass, and still not knowing why I had called it such. It was oddly comforting to hold, though, and I chose to keep it in one of my trouser pockets from then on. Occasionally one of the house staff, as I had come to think of them, would ask to sit near me, or would sit regardless, and attempt to engage with me, including the talented Gita, whose music was so lovely. However, I was in no mood to talk or play word games, and they would leave, and I recognized now how skillful they were, that they did not show offense or dissatisfaction, but allowed me my solitude with an open invitation to converse, if I desired. And so I passed from being disagreeable and tipsy to stupefied, despite my efforts at moderation. Elda had left with her arms around Denny and another woman, laughing uproariously, but not before informing me that a room had been arranged.
And just ask one of those lovely ladies to guide you to your bed. Or maybe more than one, eh, Cully?
With a not-so-subtle wink. The elderly man was being thoroughly entertained by 2 very young-looking girls wearing very little clothing. The 2 guildsmen were engaged in lively conversation, and I was having difficulty keeping my eyes open. I smelled warm mint.
Perhaps I could draw you a bath.
I looked up to discover beauty. There are literal mountains of books, reams of poetry, and songs to be sung until the end of days about being love-struck. This was not that. This was something else, something that reached deep into a part of myself, through me, and touched something else, long forgotten, something ancient and desiccated, like those crumbling parchments in the archives, but was now suddenly infused with life and vigor and color. It was a melancholy and joy so profound, I felt I would burst open and lose myself, and I desperately, feverishly wanted that.